Hello again, everyone. This video is part of my video series about the game of Go. This is the second video on the opening phase of the game, and it will deal with what to do later in the opening. The first video only dealt with the empty corners and corner approaches and the sides in a very basic level. This will still be a pretty basic video, but it will deal with a few more situations to help you get your bearings in the earlier phases of the game. It will also deal with unusual openings, not really unusual openings, but unusual opponents, or over-aggressive opponents. Let's begin. The first point I'd like to make is don't blindly follow the general ideas without thinking about the opponent's moves. That is, don't just think, okay, I know I want the empty corner, so I'll take one, and no matter what the opponent plays, just say, okay, I'll take another empty corner. Because what happened here is that the opponent showed a really aggressive approach. He tried to attack you from the word go, so to speak, before the game even began. And when the opponent attacks, you need to be careful not to be placed at a disadvantage. The opponent immediately says, I want that corner, I want to fight for it. And before we even begin talking about what's happening here, I'd like to point out that these kind of fights that erupt are actually more important than general ideas early on in the game. Because, at the very least, when you've just learned the rules recently and haven't really played all that much. And the reason is that no matter how good your general thinking is, if you just lose every corner the opponent attaches to your stone, for example, you will simply lose the game because you will lose every place you play stones in when your opponent challenges you for it, even in an unreasonable way. And this is a pretty strange move, a pretty unreasonable way, White. So first of all, White attached to your stone. What's the problem? The problem is that this stone touches your stone. It's as close to it as possible, as it can be. And they both have 3 liberties, both white and black. And if you don't reply, it's White's turn. Now, you only have 2 liberties, and each of White's stones has 3, and White's already starting to take away the corner you played in. If we go back to the efficiency principle, I mentioned in the previous video, you want to get the most with the least amount of stones. The efficiency of the stone you played here, first, Q16, has been almost erased completely. You want to avoid that if possible. I don't want to get too much into the fight because this is not a fighting lecture, but I do think it's very important to mention once again that these fights, not just this specific fight, but contact fights like these at the early phases of your learning are so important. They are much more important than the general ideas you will learn, and you will just need to play a lot and analyze them a lot and perhaps ask some better players to help you with them if you run into trouble. The important thing for this video is to not mindlessly take the open corners and the big areas. Think if the opponent's last move is actually threatening you and respond to it. Don't give away games just because you don't want to think hard about the opponent's moves. Having said that, let's return to a more calmer game, where each player takes an empty corner, and now comes the question, how do we approach the opponent's stones? Because, well, we've mentioned we can enclose our own corners, but how exactly do we approach the opponent's stones? Why do we attach to them? Do we play diagonally away from them? Do we take a bit of a distance? Well, there are a few options for that, but this is a pretty basic videos, and I'll give the basic ideas for that reason. You usually want to approach by not attaching the stone you approach to. Why? For the same reason we mentioned earlier, where the early attachments are usually unreasonable. When you attach to an opponent's stones, both stones have the same number of liberties, 3 and 3, and it's the opponent's move. So he has a slight advantage. And, of course, you're as close as you can be to them when you attach. So when he has an advantage, you are as severely affected by it as you can be. So you take a bit of a distance. Now, why is this move better than this is a matter for the more advanced lecture. It won't really matter when you just begin the game. And it's a more situational decision. So the important thing is you want to approach close enough to think that you're affecting the opponent's stone, that you're actually threatening. If the opponent will not reply, maybe you want to sandwich his stones between your own stones. Maybe you want to try to take his corner away. Usually you want to attack him if he doesn't reply, but not too close so that you'll be adversely affected by any move he makes and suddenly have to start defending yourself. Now, after you approach, or the opponent approaches you, if you're white here, for example, what's going to happen? What is going to happen from this point on? Well, the most basic idea is that white has many moves at his disposal, but 2 general options. He's threatened with an attack, so he can defend, prevent the attack, and start making some territory here on the edge. And if he wants to, he can also decide that you have only 1 stone, and you can start squeezing your 1 stone, sandwiching between these 2 stones, sandwiching your own stone. I keep mixing up if you're white or black in this game, but I hope this is still clear enough. So white can choose to sandwich the black stone between his own stones. Now, which move to choose exactly? Well, there are many moves that can be used to attack. White can sandwich the black stone by playing here, or by playing a bit further, or by playing a bit higher. And he can defend many different ways. In this video, I'm just talking about the general ideas to think about, not the exact sequences and tactics. You just want to be careful not to be overrun, to let your opponent attack you too easily, and to attack him when he decides not to defend. If the opponent defends, for example, now black has to suddenly think about his stone, because if black doesn't reply, suddenly his own stone can be attacked various different ways. So black has to decide how to defend it, which will just mean adding another black stone in a place he thinks will defend it. He can decide if he wants to try to take the corner away from white, or just create a base directly, or maybe try to build along the bottom edge of the board. There are many options here. And I will not go over them because this video is about the opening, not about specific corner sequences. I just hope to give you enough ideas to think about and be able to build on in your games. And another very important idea is the idea of the base of groups. The base is the place a group has along the side of the board where it can, should the need arise, create eyes. And here's a very simple example. This is not a video about attack and defense, this is just a general idea. Black approaches the white stone. It's not a corner approach, just approaches a stone. If white decides he wants the left edge, for example, seems like a normal move. Well, it may seem like a normal move, but when black squeezes, sandwiches the white stones like this, suddenly you will find yourself asking, where's the stone gonna get eyes? And the answer is it can't. It will have to run away. To just run, and black is getting more. Without really spending a move, white's running stone does nothing else but trump. Doesn't get any more territories. And the white group still doesn't have any place for eyes. And consider this small difference. White creates some space on the right side in which he will be able to create eyes if necessary. Will it be enough to live? I don't know. This is not a video about life and death. Actually, this group will live, but you may not know. The only important thing is that, for now at least, is that it's much easier when you have some space for eyes when the fight begins than when you don't have it at all. Be careful of creating weak groups. This is actually the most important thing until you get much stronger. It will still be the most important thing, but then it will become also a lot more complicated, and there will be more exceptions. And last of the general ideas I'd like to give you about the opening phase of the game of Go is about the ideas of potential areas and early invasions. And I'll just try to give an idea with a sample opening. For example, in this opening, I'll just continue, let's say white just plays normally, and the game just continues. Both sides just approach each other and defend their stones when needed. And suddenly white may feel very jealous of black's territory, very afraid maybe, because he sees black has a huge area. And notice this is still the opening phase of the game. There's still a huge open area on the top left, on the left side of the board. There are still open corners on the top right and bottom left. And white decides to just, and of course top left is still not a completely closed corner, until white just, for example, closes it in one of many ways. But white decides he's afraid of black's territory and he wants to break it up. And he just enters black area. Now, this is something I want to warn you about. Avoid these kinds of moves when you don't have to play them. Sometimes there will be good moves, sometimes there will be bad moves, but early on in the game, they're almost always bad if you just want to enter the opponent's area. And the problem is that you're actually giving the opponent free territory. If black wants, he can just start attacking your stone. And what are you going to do? He's taking some territory with it, and if you don't respond, he'll just have it all, just everything. If you respond, he'll just expand what he has, and suddenly you have a group which is making 0 points for you. You just hope it will survive. It's between many black stones. If it dies, black will have all this. And if it leaves, it still won't make any points for you. Which is why, as long as you don't have to play these kinds of moves, avoid making them. And if you look at the huge open area, the top right, see that if one just adds a move, just one move, is white's area really smaller than black? Maybe, I don't know, but the question is, can white gain as many points as black on the rest of the board? It seems not so unreasonable. So avoid making overly early invasions into strong opponent's position if you don't have to, if you don't think he's way ahead, he has way more territory than you. I'm not saying these moves are bad. They can be bad, they can be not so bad at times, but usually they will put you at a local disadvantage, at a very bad fight, and you want to make sure you had to play there before you do. Now, before we end this, I'd like to give you just 5 simple principles which will enable you to play the opening phase of the game of Go very, very good. As long as no weird fighting occurs early on, of course. In which case, your fighting ability will determine the result. The first one is don't create weak groups in the opening. We've seen one example before. You've seen one example. Don't just create weak groups. If White just ignores the opponent's attack, then just he gets attacked severely. The opponent gets free territory. White doesn't want this stone to get killed, or this entire side goes to black. May go to black. Don't create weak group. Make sure they have a base. Always in the opening phases of the game. The second important principle is that unless you need to escape being surrounded, you want to play on the 3rd or 4th line from the edges. Why is that? Well, because of the efficiency principle discussed in the earlier video. You want to be as efficient as possible. There is no real reason to play lower than 3rd line, because when you play 2nd line, then even if my mistake. Even if you play 3rd line, you don't really mind the opponent coming under you. He will just be a disadvantage. He's almost captured, so you won't be in that much of a danger. So why play for less when you can for more? And playing the 4th line, well, the opponent can come under you, but he will still feel a bit uncomfortable. Or if he plays even a bit further away from you, more under you, then, well, he's not making anything for himself, and it's hard to make eyes in the 2nd line too. So you should be able to find a way to be okay there. But if you play on the 5th line, the opponent can play what we said you could play earlier and take the territory away, and your stone may not be doing anything suddenly. That's why the 3rd and 4th lines are usually the good places to play if you're not in the middle of a quirky fight or something. 3rd and 4th lines are usually the good places to play in the opening phase. What's the difference between them is the subject for a more advanced video I will be making. Another important idea is that of double wings, that is, territory with multiple sides to it. For example, if White ignores this black formation completely, then black can just create 2 extensions on 2 different sides of the corner. That is called a double wing. The corner is enclosed and it has extended in both directions. What that means, and that could also be here, of course, what that means is that wherever White tries to get later, tries to prevent black from getting one of them, it'll be very hard or impossible to prevent him from both getting this side and this side. He will, since he already has stones at both, he'll get one of them. So territory which can expand in multiple directions is a lot easier to build further and further, and it's a lot harder to destroy. So you want to make the double wings if you can, destroy them, prevent your opponent from making them if you can. And the last 2 things are the most important things you will ever, I think, in my opinion, learn in the game of Go, which is the 2 principles of don't follow the opponent blindly. Don't just play wherever he plays until he decides to leave to leave the area. For example, if both players defend their positions, black added this stone in order to not get severely attacked with no place for eyes. So, and white says, well, I want to keep the corner. I don't want to let black in there. Well, then black will just think that this just a few points. This lone stone is not worth that much. Just a couple of points, and we'll just go elsewhere. And the same happens here, and white again says, I don't want black to have the corner. I will keep following him in this area. Now just take a look at the board. One look at the board and just say, who do you think is ahead? Who do you think has more potential territory here? And I'm sure you'd say black. Don't mindlessly follow the opponent. If neither you or the opponent's group is in danger, try to go to another big area. And the last one is called the flow of Go, the flow of the game of Go. Whenever you find it difficult to understand where you want to play, think about the flow of Go is you play where your opponent didn't. So think about where your opponent ignored you, or where he could have added the move and didn't, and you want to try to get back there. Which is why if white ignored the move, an approach move, and you want to come back and try to punish him for it, sandwich his stone, attack him. And if he goes back and defend, yeah, he didn't defend his 017 stone. You want to find ways to attack this stone. Conversely, you want to come back and defend where you didn't, perhaps, earlier. And this ends the basic overview of the opening phase of the game. I hope this really helped your openings. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And I will be starting a slightly more advanced series for beginner players, not just players who have only learned the rules. And I'm looking forward to your feedback. That's it for now. Bye for now.